I'm just wanted to keep it real today. Wanting to be connected to you today and not up here on the platform. Sometimes it feels separate up there. Today especially, I don't want to feel separate. I want to really connect with you. And because I just want to, again, just kind of be real today because I'm struggling a bit today. Some days they're easier than others to be a minister. Some days it's easier than others to stand up and to try to speak intelligently or or to be inspiring in some ways. And so today I think that I'm struggling a little bit with that. I'm part of a Facebook group for Unity Ministers. It's a discussion group. And somebody posted yesterday the question, how are you going to address this latest mass shooting in your talk on Sunday? And there were several comments that went back and forth about that. And there's so much happening. There's so much, and you look at Facebook and other social media, and there's so much going on, so many opinions and thoughts about how we should respond, what do we need to do. The idea of gun control has come up yet once again. What do we do about that? Lots of blame, lots of shame, lots of guilt being spread around all over the place about what happened and why it happened and how we could prevent it, how we can prevent it happening again. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I am conflicted because, of course, I have my own opinions about that, and I know that some of you might share my opinions and some of you don't share my opinions about that, and that's perfectly fine, and I'd like for us to have conversation about that. So I hesitate even to talk about it, because I know some people in this room would, again, support what I might want to say. But I also know that there's a resistance sometimes, especially in Unity, to talk about anything that might have the political sort of bent. I know that some people in this community, some people have left this community because they thought I was being too political about some things. Some people have left this church because they don't think I'm political enough or speak strongly enough about social issues. And so it's a tough call. Walk a fine line in how to speak about these things. And so, yes, I've struggled a little bit about how to speak today. I thought about, how can my message that I had sort of thought through and planned this week to talk about, how does that apply? Because I was going to, and I will still talk about Jesus' teaching about love.
Who got very political.
Yes, he did. Jesus really did get talked about what the ills of the culture that he lived in, both from a governmental standpoint and from a religious standpoint. So what did he teach about that? And that's what I wanted to focus on during Lent. This is the first Sunday of Lent. And so my idea was to focus on what does Jesus teach us about love and how to be love in the world? How can we apply those teachings, understand those teachings at a deeper level, and apply them in our daily walk? I believe that, as I said last week, Jesus taught on many different levels. He taught many times through telling stories, parables. And of course, parables can be taken as literal. They can look at the surface level, but he probably, if he wanted to say it directly, he probably wouldn't have talked about it in a parable. Parables have deeper meaning, underlying truths that those who are willing and able to dig into those truths can then discover for themselves. And so the parable that I would want to talk about today, when Jesus said, love, the greatest commandment is to love God, to love your neighbor as yourself. And then somebody in the crowd who was trying to trick him or trip him up said, well, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus went into telling the story about the traveler who was going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he came upon some robbers. They beat him and robbed him and left him on the side of the road dead. Almost dead. He wasn't dead. Left him for dead. Along comes a priest, and the priest passes by the man, walks on the other side of the road, and doesn't even pay any attention. Then along comes a Levite, and the Levite looks at the man and just passes on by as well. But then the Samaritan comes along, and the Samaritan goes to where the man is. And the Samaritan pours his wine and oil on the man's wounds, picks him up, puts him on his animal, probably a donkey, I don't know, and takes him to the inn, where he gives the innkeeper some money to care for the man and promises that when he returns, he will repay him anything that he has spent. Now, on the surface, that would say to us that our neighbor is anyone, that we are all each other's neighbors, we are all each other's brothers, we are here to care for each other, no matter what. Now, that's a very powerful story from the historical perspective, because Jews despised Samaritans. They believed they were half-breeds, they were outcasts, they were social pariahs for the Jews, because Samaritans were half-breed in their eyes, the Israelites and the Assyrians who conquered part of Israel back in the, I think it was maybe the 7th century, 8th century BCE. And this was a people who came from that. And so the Jews did not associate with Samaritans. And so for Jesus to be saying to the crowd, which was mostly Jews, that the Samaritan was the one who responded, and even the Samaritan is your brother. He was teaching about our mutuality, our kinship. Now, Mother Teresa famously once said, "We have forgotten that we belong to each other." And so we need to remember that we belong to each other. And we respond where there is need. So that's one level that we can understand the story. But I'd like to offer a couple of other ways that we could understand the story. One is that imagine what it might take for someone like a Samaritan. We might even compare a Samaritan in our culture to, in our white Anglo Judeo-Christian culture, we might compare a Samaritan to an African American. We might compare a Samaritan to a Native American. We might compare a Samaritan to a I don't know, name. Mexican. Yeah, we might compare a Samaritan to many different things. Imagine a Samaritan. Now, I'm going to assume that the man who was on the side of the road was probably a Jew. Imagine a Samaritan who had been marginalized, demonized in some ways, outcasts from society, who came upon a man on the side of the road who probably may have represented everything that was oppressing to him. a culture that oppressed him, that marginalized him, that separated him in some way from his divine nature, or wanted to. And so the priest walks by, the Levite walks by, but the Samaritan responds, even to someone who might have been his nemesis, his oppressor. And I think as we are looking at this season of peace and nonviolence, that is the love that Jesus was calling us to. To rise above all of that and to love even those who might be our oppressors. That is the nature of the essence of love that Jesus taught, and that is the essence of love that Martin Luther King Jr., in leading the civil rights movement, stressed. I can't imagine being a black person in America, even today, let alone in the mid-century that has passed and before that. The pain, the anger, the just total dejection. And then to be able to stand with great love and to be present for whatever was coming their way without fighting back, without that idea of blaming and guilting and shaming, but to show up in love. Same practice that Gandhi promoted in India. Cesar Chavez with the migrant farm workers and the Dalai Lama. That idea of showing up in love. And so I think Jesus was teaching us about a deeper love that goes beyond even our deepest hurt. It's easy to love the people who love you. It's easy to love the people, even the people who are in your community, who might not totally love you. It's easier to love those people, but it's not always easy to love those who oppress you, those who would like to see you outside of society. And I think that's what Jesus is calling us to. But one more thing I want to share about the story. And this is really more from a metaphysical perspective, but I think it speaks more directly to what I want to talk about a little bit today. And that is that metaphysically, as we understand these stories, every aspect of the story, every character in the story represents an aspect of us, an aspect of you and me. Even the man, and especially the one who was on the side of the road, bleeding, injured. Going down from Jerusalem to Jericho represents that idea of us even coming into this life experience, coming into human form. And what do we face when we come into human form? Some more than others, but stress and pain and suffering and ridicule and blame and guilt and shame and all of those things that just take away your life energy. Some more than others. Most of us in this room are very fortunate that we do live in a culture where we are the privileged in many ways. But who is that priest that walks by? What aspect of us is the priest who walks by? I'm going to say this to all of us today, and some of you may not like this. But I think especially sometimes in unity, that we have an idea that we have to be above that. That we have to somehow be more spiritual, that our spirituality helps us and entitles us to rise above what is going on down here. And so we might notice what is going on down here, but we use our spiritual principles as, oh, well, if we're spiritual enough, then that'll just take care of itself. The other aspect of that is the Levite. And the Levite, to me, is representing the one who says, and please don't hear me say that I don't appreciate the power of prayer. I appreciate the power of prayer. But if we walk by what's happening in the world around us and just try to pray it away, it ain't happening. Our prayers and our thoughts, yes, they lift up people in the world. They lift us up and they can lift up society, but that is not enough. The Samaritan represents our highest and best, the Christ within us. What does Jesus say in the story? The Samaritan goes to where the man is. He meets him where he is. And he pours his oil and his wine out upon this man. The prayers, his good, his financial good, all of the things that his spirit, his prayers, his actions, his activity to lift this man up and take care of him. And I think that is what we are called to do from that place of love. From the place of love. And I think that all of it is important. Our spiritual principles are important. Our prayers, our thoughts are important. And our actions are equally important. Body, mind, and spirit. Not just mind and spirit, the body has to be in there too. And so I think that's the level of love that Jesus is calling us to now. What I want to say is that there are many people in our world today who need lifting up and need support. But there's also that man that's left on the side of the road can also represent an aspect of our society that is in pain, is suffering, is in need of healing. The body of our society, the body of our culture, is demonstrating illness, symptoms of a very serious illness. I said a couple of weeks ago that I think it's important for us to treat the cause, which is a spiritual dis-ease, rather than continuing to treat the symptoms, but we have to treat the symptoms in order to get to a place where we can treat the cause. And there are lots of symptoms happening in our world today. And so how do we show up? How do we show up? And what I want to say about that is when we, as the priest or as the Levite, it is so easy for us to be in judgment. Isn't it easy? Isn't that sort of our human nature to want to blame somebody else? To want to criticize somebody else? Oh, it's the FBI's fault. Oh, it's our Congress's fault because we don't have gun control laws. Oh, it's always somebody else's fault. They should be doing something. Yeah. But we're not going to solve or get to the cause, get to the issue by blaming, by judging, by criticizing. Because when we do that, we're not in love. We're in fear. And so what I want to, and let me just say this too. I am speaking to myself here. And I know that. But I am encouraging myself and I'm encouraging you, us, to ask ourselves, what is mine to do from a response from a place of love, not fear, not blame, not shame, not guilt. It doesn't matter whose fault it is or was. See how placing blame has really gotten us nowhere. Nowhere. And it never will. From a place of love, what is mine to do? Now, if you believe that having stricter gun control laws is the solution, stand for that. Stand for that. Don't fight against. Because what we know when we fight against, we are adding negative energy to whatever we are fighting against. And we're only making it more powerful. Stand for what you believe in from a place of centered love. Meet whatever that issue is right where it is, with your mind filled with love, with the heart of love, and with your actions based in love to carry forth what we need to do. Yes, to help alleviate the symptoms and also to help cure the disease. And so hopefully that is what we are doing as a spiritual community. And that's what we do individually. The other aspect of that, the other side of that, for me, is that I believe that a great deal of the ills that we are experiencing in our world come from our continual marginalization of each other, of people. I don't know the whole story about what happened in Florida. But what I heard about the story is that the young man who did the shooting needed help. He needed to know that he was valuable. He needed to know that he was included. He needed to know that he was not being marginalized by being expelled from school. I know that's the easy thing to do. But what if somebody had loved him into knowing who he truly is? What if somebody had included him? What if somebody had met him right where he was and loved him back into inclusion and into community? I don't know the answer. I wish I did. But I believe that Jesus, if we're going to follow the teaching of Jesus, which I believe was all about love. How do we love? Love each other through our own filters, our own fears, our own judgments, our own pain, our own hurt. To show up with great love, not just for those who are easy to love. But for those who are a little more challenging for us to love, love them back into the community, the human family. I think that can go a long way to meeting people where they are and meeting the need that is present in the moment. And so, search your own heart. Don't be the one who ignores the issue. Don't be the one who just walks by and thinks somebody else is going to take care of it. Let us be the ones. Let us be the Samaritans who show up right where it is and do what is ours to do. That's my prayer. That's my desire. Hopefully, I can show up differently.